good morning, and welcome to Productivity Mastery. I'm having a pleasure and a privilege to be joined today by a kick-ass founder from the region of New Europe, as we like to describe it. Tatyana Mitkova is the co-founder and CEO of ClaimCompass, a company that raised more than 1.8 million and has been in a very interesting situation flying through the pandemic as a travel startup. That's what we're going to be speaking about. Those of you who are tuning in live, make sure to post your question if you have any question regarding productivity, entrepreneurship, and anything that's interesting to you with respect to Tatyana's story. Tatyana, before we begin, why don't you introduce yourself and share more about your background, the story of Claim Compass? Where did you guys come from? Why did you decide to build this thing, and what's happening today?
Well, hi everyone, and Sam, thanks so much for having me today. It's a pleasure. So started about 6 years ago. Back then, I was based in Berlin. I was finishing up my studies. I was actually a law student at the time, and my former dream was to become a lawyer, probably in Germany or somewhere in Europe. So jumping in to start a company was something that I didn't really imagine myself doing. But I was based in Berlin, and Berlin was becoming the startup capital of Europe. So at one point, even if you had nothing to do with early stage companies, you would go to startup events or you would study in co-working places or cafes. And at one point, all of your friends would start working or doing internships for startups. So it's kind of inescapable. And yeah, that's kind of like the moment where I started thinking about maybe I should start a company or I should try something out. And my company, ClaimCompass, it is a legal tech company, so it still has a little bit to do with my background. So I started it with my two co-founders, Alex and Veli, who are responsible for marketing and tech. So it's a nice combination of different skill sets and backgrounds that helped us build what we have so far, which is an automated legal and travel tech company that helps travelers save money and get compensated when something goes wrong with their flight.
I just want to stop you for a second and ask you, how did you meet your co-founders? There's many entrepreneurs, especially early stage, that struggle to find the right co-founders. So how did you guys meet each other? I met you in the office a couple of weeks ago, and I kind of felt this really good energy in between you guys. So maybe you can share, how did you meet and decided to build a company together?
That's such a central question. And at that point, like back when we started, I didn't realize how serious of a decision this is. But and some people say it's kind of like marriage or a relationship. They also say that for investors. So you would have like many relationships as a startup founder. But yeah, I think now that I work with more early stage founders who usually start as solo founders, this question comes up a lot. They're always wondering, should I turn to a friend or a former colleague, somebody who's close to me, or should I go to a networking event for co-founders and like meet a stranger who maybe is passionate about the problem I'm solving? So for us, it was the friendship connection. So the fun part of the story is that my two co-founders did not know each other before they started working together. So I was the connection between the three of us. With Veli, I actually know him from high school. So it was a long lasting friendship where he had gone to study abroad. So he studied computer engineering. I had went to study abroad. We did keep that connection, but he was one of the first people to pop into my head when I realized I actually need a tech co-founder because I cannot build a website or an app myself. And with Alex, we met in Berlin through some student organizations back when we were a bit younger and studying there. So we were involved in a few NGO-like projects of Bulgarians abroad or promoting social entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship with regards to Bulgaria. So we were working on some events, inviting speakers, and that's where we found out we actually make a great fit when it comes to working together. And yeah, again, he was one of the first people to pop into my head when I decided I need some more hands on deck for this idea.
Beautiful. I think it's a really relevant topic to explore. Like so many people right now trying to find the right people to connect with, and at the same time, so many companies actually failing because of certain misalignments that come afterwards. You're working together 2, 3, 4 years, and then you figure out me and my co-founder, we're not on the same page. We have different vision, different idea about what's the level of commitment we want to put into this thing, or on a more kind of a ground level, we have misalignment on values, principles, the way we want to do things. So thank you for sharing, Tatyana. We actually have a question which I think is relevant for this part of the conversation. Thank you, Wafa, for joining the conversation with this question. So her question is, how was the competition in the industry before you started your company? And how did you cope with that?
Great question. We actually got inspired by something similar to competition. So, as I mentioned, I was based in Germany at the time, and I noticed that some law firms or lawyers they were exploring this space. So they weren't exploring it as a startup or a tech company, not necessarily. They were usually building a landing page and promoting the fact that you can claim money if your flight is disrupted. So this is how I found out about the whole thing. And it turns out the regulation that this whole thing is based on was at the time over a decade old. And still, most people had no idea this existed. And they were frustrated when they had to claim compensation because the airline would reject them or ignore them. And then, paying a lawyer upfront, that's not the best experience. So companies like ours were kind of emerging in Western Europe, and there were even a few that were startup-like. They were starting to attract capital. But our initial thesis was, why is nobody doing this in New Europe, so Central and Eastern Europe? So actually, we did start in this region. We launched websites on Russian, Turkish, Romanian, Greek, Bulgarian. So we actually covered all of these untapped markets, and we had the first mover advantage. So we did track what the Western competitors were doing, but at first we did not go head to head when it comes to competition. But yeah, it actually, of course, started to get more interesting as the years went by because some companies attracted funding, ClaimCompass included, and some of us started to automate as much as we can. So we started building some competitive advantages compared to, let's say, a German lawyer who can process a few hundred claims a year.
And how did the journey evolve from there? You guys ended up at 500 startups. What really triggered that decision?
That's one of my favorite parts of the journey so far. We sometimes think of 500 startups and our time there kind of in a similar way to when people remember college or like some of their best months or years where they learned a lot and had a lot of like new friends and connections. So we spent about 4 months in Silicon Valley, and for us as outsiders, so coming from Europe, not really knowing anyone, it was just tremendously eye-opening and inspiring. So this is a typical acceleration program. Now, before COVID, it was face-to-face. So you would get to move to Mountain View or San Francisco, and you would get to spend a few months, so about 4 months, doing the program. And you would have all these workshops and lectures, but also office hours with mentors or investors. And then you would work from the same co-working space as all the other companies on the batch, which was actually one of the main benefits, because imagine 30 or 40 other companies with multiple co-founders each, all in the same space. So you would have like 100 people that you can turn to whenever you are struggling with something. I remember one night we were so stressed out because one of our freelancers that we hired was not performing the way we expected to be performing, and we were so inexperienced as managers. Like we hadn't hired almost anyone at this point. We were doing most of the work ourselves. So we were so stressed on like, how do we communicate with her that this is not what we expected, and like, do we fire her. And she's a freelancer, so actually I don't think she really cared about this whole situation. But we were stressing out, and it was late in the office, and we were like around a ping pong table where people would gather. And then some Canadian founders from another startup, they came by and they're like, "You guys look like something's going on. Like, what's up?" And they were able to actually share a bunch of like experience because this was their third startup, third company. They had hired and fired people before. So they kind of gave us a crash course on people management 101 for just like 15 minutes over a beer. And we felt this relief of like we're in a supporting ecosystem where everybody's there to help us or to share knowledge. So these kind of situations, they just happened all the time. And we learned so much while we were at 500. And of course, a big thing about this program and many acceleration programs is that they also give you access to funding. So we did get our first investment from 500, was $150,000, which was the first money coming in that really helped us increase our marketing outreach and hire our first team members. And then the whole program finishes up with a demo day where the audience basically is like 200 to 300 investors, which is crazy, especially if you think of it as a European founder, where, I mean, at this point in like 2017, I don't know if we even had like 200 investors in Europe, startup investors. So it's, it's a completely different place, kind of like out of HBO's Silicon Valley experience, where you just feel so lucky to be there. And for us, it was really trajectory changing. It helped us grow so much as founders, but also as a company.
I can imagine the excitement of, just going there from Europe and meeting so many people every day. And one of the points that you're making, which I think is really relevant, is exactly the network, right? The importance of surrounding yourself with people who are in this industry, who are in the same mindset, who will support you and back you up. Because often as a founder, one of the things is your friends and your family, they want to support you, but even they don't know what you're going through. So having a network of other entrepreneurs, founders, investors, the community that will lift you up when you most need it, will give you an advice and so on is so important. And I'm curious what happened afterwards, and specifically, when was it the latest funding round that you guys got? Was it 2019, 20? When was it that you?
2019, so over the summer 2019. Fortunately, before the pandemic, because going back to the main topic of this episode, we're a travel company and there had just been a pandemic, so we were heavily affected by COVID. So being in a position where we had money in the bank and runway and had raised the round before the pandemic started actually put us in an incredibly lucky and fortunate position because we were able to survive and actually still be there, be here, unlike other companies that weren't that fortunate. And that imagine entering the pandemic with like 6 or 9 months of runway and having to raise money in such a tough environment. So yeah, I'm very thankful when it comes to the timing of our seed round.
Yeah, and let's just separate the podcast on prior COVID and after COVID. And now we're kind of leaning into the after COVID. So pandemic happens. I'm actually very curious to hear what really happened the first few weeks, right? You got this funding round. You guys are building, growing the team. How many times were at that time in the team? How many people, were in the team?
We had 32 team members, and we were actually actively hiring. So we were hiring people almost like every 1 or 2 weeks and growing and onboarding everyone. We were in this big office and we're like planning, would we grow out of this office? So the mindset was about growing everything, the customer base, the team, launching new stuff. So when we started seeing the signs of the pandemic, there was this weird feeling. We actually did start seeing it a few weeks before things really started happening. I think for most people, like mid-March was when we were really hit by the fact that there's going to be lockdowns and this is a serious thing. But When it comes to flights, so first we started seeing signs from Asian and international flights, starting from January. Then even in February, countries like Italy started to be really hit, and we started seeing cancellations because of COVID. Even the junior claims processing or customer support agents that we had started seeing a pattern. And they were like, all of the flights we're getting inquiries or claims for are canceled because of COVID. So this seems like it's going to be something big that's really going to influence the industry for at least a few months. So this tension started building out just because it's because of this industry specific effect that it had. And we started wondering, okay, so let's start tracking. Imagine like on our website, we didn't even know which flights wouldn't be eligible because of COVID, because we never had like a drop down option related to COVID before COVID. And we started gathering data, analyzing flights, like what's happening. Are they canceled because of the pandemic or something else? And we just wanted to get a feeling on how big this is going to be. And it turns out it was really severe. It was at one point just almost 100% of all cancellations were because of national travel restrictions and the pandemic. So yeah, and in mid-March, we had to react much like all other companies in the industry, independent of their industry, where we closed down our office, we sent everyone home, we set up everything for remote work, and we had to start thinking about completely readjusting the plan for the year and our projections. Things like freezing our marketing budget, just because it makes no sense to be advertising when there are no flights in the air, if you remember April and May. And yeah, so step by step, we tried to respond to the crisis and to the situation. And just going back to what we briefly discussed, the support network of our investors or mentors or peer companies was really, really important. We had a ton of calls with other people, just asking them, what are you doing? So how is your company reacting? Or do you have any advice, especially if you've been there for some of the previous financial crises? Like, what did you do? And how should we think about runway, about our team, about growth, or like the lack of growth that expects us in the next few months? So this was really helpful. And yeah, again, I'm really thankful that we have this network to turn to, because it not only do you learn from it, but it gives you a certain amount of relief and support just emotionally, because I mean, you can stress out a lot when situations like this appear, but once you have a few conversations, a few one-on-ones with other more experienced entrepreneurs, it seems to be better somehow.
Yeah, it's when this thing happened, I think it's like the whole world, at least the first 4 to 8 weeks, one of the biggest challenges was this uncertainty. I think in a few months after that, it became a little bit more calm, because yes, this whole thing is there, but at least you kind of know what it is. At the beginning, it was such an uncertain situation, everybody panicking, stressing out. And actually, Wafa have a different question, another great question. She's asking, did you have to restructure your business model due to COVID? In what way were you affected by COVID? And maybe I cannot hear, did you have to also downsize? What happened within the company?
So let me start by the second part of that question. How were we affected? It was a pretty straightforward logic here. It's like we work with flights, disrupted flights that are a percentage of all flights. So if you have no flights, or if you have like just 20 or 30% of the flights you had before, then just the amount of work that we have is really like disappears, and our bottom line is heavily affected. Now here again, other companies may have been in a tougher spot. Imagine if you are selling tickets, if you're a travel agent, or if you're an app that helps people plan a trip. Then, I mean, we know companies like this that were just down to zero. So they had nothing. They were like, for the first few months of the pandemic and summer, their revenue and traffic and everything was just down to zero. Now, in our case, we did have disrupted flights to work with, although they weren't many. And we also entered the pandemic with a backlog of flights, a backlog of claims that we were already processing. Just because of our business model, which is we help you turn this claim into a compensation, and sometimes this requires legal actions even. It's not in all cases, but in some. So these legal actions can take a few months. We sometimes even go to court. And entering the pandemic, we did have a sizable backlog of all these legal claims that were getting paid out throughout the year. So again, kind of a lucky situation where we had booked revenue that was going to be paid out in the next month, even though we don't get as many new claims. But when it comes to adapting our business model, the first logical thing that we just learned from our customers and what they were asking was assisting them with COVID ticket refunds. So imagine your flight is canceled and you want to get a ticket refund, and airlines are just delaying. You probably read this on the news, but of course they had major cash flow issues with having to refund millions or hundreds of millions of euros in ticket refunds. So they were either not responding, delaying, or issuing vouchers that people just don't need because they're not going to travel in 2020. So we developed a new service that was helping people claim a ticket refund, and then we helped them get that ticket refund. That was something new. And we did explore other different things that we could be working on that were COVID related. But at one point we decided we want to stick to our original vision and not escape from it too much. So while we adjusted a little bit, we decided we're not doing something completely different or pivoting just because of the pandemic. And we, at the end of the day, decided we believe that travel will come back. We believe that we want to be there when it does, and we don't want to get too distracted in the meantime. So what we did is actually double down on our main value propositions and product. We did expand the product, and maybe that's something that we can talk a little bit more about later related to the US market and what we do there. But yeah, we didn't distract ourselves too much.
This is great what you're sharing, and I think that one of the things that I'm picking from this is that you guys were not wasting any second, any minute. You sit together. You got advice from your advisors, investors, mentors, and you decided to take some fast and bold moves. So what I'm curious to dig deeper into is, how did you guys communicate in this situation? And I think many founders these days are also faced with uncertainty, not just during the pandemic. Like generally, being an entrepreneur is a journey of a lot of uncertainty. Shit hits the fan sometimes. So how do you kind of calm yourself when everything starts to break down? And in what way you lead the communication with your co-founders and with your team?
Well, I don't feel like I'm the most successful example of what you just described.
Okay.
I would love to be, but the truth is we're all human, and this has been an incredibly stressful year, even apart from work. Like everybody was worried about their health or their relatives' health. We couldn't travel or rest. We were trapped at home. So even besides like being a founder of a travel tech company, I know all of us had other challenges just personally to deal with this year. So when it comes to communication, I'm not sure, again, we have some great advice or something really wise to say. We just try to talk every day. So some people refer to this as a war room where you have all your like the co-founders or top executives, and you discuss what the next steps are constantly. So, I mean, when the crisis just happened, you do this every day, then maybe you do this every week, then every other week. But the point is, it's the frequency is much more intense compared to quarterly planning or something like that. So we did that. We actually had a call every morning, and it was a combination of just mental health call, a call on like, how is everybody doing? Are you okay? Are you worried? Like, do you have anxiety from reading the news? And but also like a work related call with what should we do next? Like, should we what do we do related to customer acquisition, to the product, to the team? There was so much communication in these early days, and I think you can never overdo communication when it comes to such a stressful period. So you have to be thinking about your customers, but also your employees and the people you work with. So over communicating is a good idea. We did try to. I mean, we were in a responsible position as an employer to also take care of people, and things like sending them home or giving them advice on how to be responsible. You know, in the first few months, if you remember, it was all about washing your hands and social distancing. So we had to think about that, to create guides, to talk to people. We set up some new rituals just because we couldn't see each other in the office anymore. We started doing things like virtual coffee, where a bot on Slack would actually connect random people from the team, and they would have a virtual coffee just talking about anything but work, which again helped keep us sane at least a little bit. And yeah, we did a bunch of virtual events. Again, some of them were just checking in on each other. Others were about how do we think about our whole strategy, about the vision, about the company? Should people be worried about runway? Should they be worried about being laid off? So all these hard questions, we really felt like we need to address them and to actually lead the conversation and not let people worry too much about all of them. But you know, just like I think we briefly discussed it back when you were in the office a few weeks ago, but we are super fortunate to have the team that we have, and this investment in team culture and in finding people who are the right fit really pays off during times of crisis. So just the fact that these people did not leave the company or did not move to maybe another company that's not as affected by COVID as we are, it just really shows that we kind of did the prep work in a way that, that motivates people to stay. And they were really strong, again, physically when it comes to mental health, but also when it comes to the work ethic to actually stick with us, to do the best out of the situation, and to try to get this whole company out of the crisis in the best shape possible.
I just want to praise you for being so honest and upfront. And I think many of the listeners looking at you will say, she's a confident, positive leader, moving mountains and so on. And sometimes we forget to talk about the human side of things. So I'm very happy that you actually share that. Maybe we have not been the best in doing this because we're human at the end of the day. You try to do your best, but again, you're stressing out about things. I mean, you're human. And maybe that's interesting for me, at least, to hear what were some of the things that were stressing you most in the past 12 months?
Well, personally, it was maybe, it has obviously built up. I think most startup founders have a variety of things that had been stressing them out for a few years, especially as the company is growing. There are always things that you can do to try to calm yourself down or prevent a burnout, because, you know, burnout can happen even if you have a really successful company and everything's going great. So I think me and my co-founders, we had worked really hard for a few years, and we had certain aspirations on where we want to take this company. Things related to, again, growing or raising more money, or at one point getting to an exit event. It's standard things that most founders think are the success story. So entering the pandemic, the hardest thing was adjusting our expectations and plans, because if you see how your customers disappear for a few months, this uncertainty can really be unsettling. You can start thinking about, what if they never come back? What if the pandemic takes 3 years and we run out of money in the meantime? What if, our competitors think of something different and innovative while we're stuck waiting for the market to come back? So there is all these potential scenarios in your hand. It's a lot. It's related to overthinking or just increased anxiety in general. And I think, these were some of the hardest things, the things stressing us out. So we tried to really take care of ourselves. At least for me, this was the first year where I focused on self-care a little bit more. Up until then, it was just all about working every day, all day. I was so happy just working for 10 hours a day, or having meetings, or constantly talking to other people, hiring people, talking to investors. And as the pandemic hit and we were all alone at home and we didn't have too many people to talk to because everybody was trying to save their own company, it was a gap that needed to be filled. So at least for me, I kind of turned to just the standard self-care things like exercising every day or improving my diet or reading and resting a little bit more. So I think this was a wise decision again when it comes to burnout prevention, because if you concentrate on work too much and it's in a period where work is going to be tough and challenging just in general, then again you kind of put all your eggs in the same basket, and this basket is a really tough spot. So we try to just take care of ourselves and preserve ourselves to be able to then be here when travel comes back again. So it's already been a year, so I think we kind of accomplished part of it already just by being here, not having quit or not having suffered a burnout, and I've taken some time off work. So yeah, I think it paid off.
It is such an excellent, such a brilliant point that you're making. The importance of self-care and prioritizing your well-being. The thing that you said about when you prioritize only your business and your life becomes your business, then you kind of have the tendency to get attached to it. You get attached to the results and you're stressing out about things even more because there's nothing else that's going on in your life. And that's why it's super important to create some sort of a balance as long as you can. Of course, when it comes to being a founder entrepreneur, of course you need to move things and get things done and be really focused, but it shouldn't come at the expense of taking care of your own self. So thank you for sharing some of the strategies that's been working for you. I'm curious whether you have some sort of a workload boundaries. Many people these days struggle with defining when should I stop working. I actually recently had a mastermind call with, I think there were 4 entrepreneurs, and I was facilitating a workshop, and we were in this kind of a mastermind group, and everybody had to share for 15 minutes. It was their space. What are they struggling with most? And then the rest of the people in the group, we had to give them feedback, ideas, ask them the right questions. So it's kind of like a mastermind call. And interestingly, 3 out of 4 people had the same challenge. Man, I have so much on my to-do list that when I stop working, I'm feeling guilty and I cannot fully unplug. When I'm not working, I'm stressed about the work. I cannot sleep well, and then the next day comes and it's like a vicious cycle. So I'm wondering if you have any kind of a idea, strategy, or suggestion for the audience in that perspective.
Well, again, it's a struggle for me too. So I don't think I've solved this one. For me, it's not necessarily just things on my to-do list. I do manage to have boundaries when it comes to that. When it's I have stuff planned for the day, either like everything goes well, I accomplish all the tasks, or something gets moved to one of the next days. But I don't generally over stress about to-do list tasks. What I do tend to overthink is, I mean, especially as a startup founders, we don't stop thinking about the company. It's not necessarily about things we need to do, but just things that we're thinking about. So again, what are we going to do? Should we raise more money? What should I do about this particular challenge that we're having? So this never stops, and it's really hard to disattach yourself from thoughts like this. So even if you're trying to get to sleep in the evening and your head is racing and you're thinking about all these topics, this could be stressful. So yeah, I found that again, investing into things other than work really pays off. So it could be as simple as just spending more time with friends who ideally are not even in the startup world, so they really don't get what all the stress is all about, and they can ground you. And spending time with your family, with your loved ones, doing an activity that you like sports or a hobby. This really helps also physically to kind of release some of this energy that you're holding, but mentally as well. And I mean, it's so much easier to go to sleep if you're tired from this activity and you don't have too much time to overthink. But yeah, also just talking this out, like in your master group, like it's a great habit to have either mastermind group or another support network, or even a one-on-one accountability buddy where you can sometimes vent a little bit or complain that you're not succeeding in something, but also get some feedback and try to be better. And honestly, I don't think I've met any founders who don't have this challenge. So I think it's a pretty common one, and it's you probably have to be really zen, or this is like your seventh company and you're already really used to this to be doing better. But the rest of us are just most of the time overwhelmed by all these thoughts.
It's an exceptional point, and those of you who are listening, if you're feeling stressed or if you're feeling not at your optimal state, and that's fine, that's okay. You're just a human at the end of the day. Again, you still focus on do your very best. You take care of your team, not just in terms of the results they need to produce from a productivity standpoint, but also in terms of taking care of them as human beings. But at the end of the day, if you do only this and you don't take care of yourself, that's also not good, because you're the person that, again, you're responsible for the whole team, for the whole company. You need to be at your optimal state within the context of what's happening. I know some of you who are listening in countries that you had a lockdown that's been maybe for quite too long, that could be affecting your mental health. Maybe you're not meeting people, or maybe you have to work home with a couple of kids at all times. And these things are all affecting us. So taking good care of yourself is really, really important. And then it comes to taking care of the team. And Tatyana, I think we had a bit of a conversation when I was back in the office, but I'm curious, how do you make sure you're actually productive and get things done? I saw that you're very into those type of concepts, but what do you do to make sure you are focused on the right things and you actually produce results?
Well, I'm a fan of all these popular systems that have been proven to work. So, for example, on the company level, we use objectives and key results, or OKRs, which are pretty common when it comes to tech companies and tech startups. So we do them on a quarterly basis, and we try to do a bottom-up approach where we have this discussion with the team a few weeks before each quarter starts. And we really think about the challenges we've had, the metrics that we could improve, the new things that we can start working on or experimenting with, and put that down on paper and just start thinking about concrete objectives that we need to focus on. So usually, again, pre-pandemic, it was more, I would say, standard. Again, all about growth. So improving all the metrics, growing all the metrics. So each team specifically just had areas of concentration, like, can we automate more? Can we improve this and spend less time on it? Can we get more people to sign up? Can we increase the conversion rate? So things like that. And then each team would take these objectives and they would break them down, be it in weekly sprints or some other format that they're using. So this was really, really helpful, because at any point, if you start wondering, like, why am I doing this, or is this worth it? You can always take a look at the objectives. And, these objectives are not put in stone and like super solid. We can always adjust them, especially based on learnings. So if we see something just doesn't make sense, or the customers are not responding to it, we can always completely scrap it or update it to a new objective or a new key result that we're looking for. So this has always been really helpful to anyone on the team. And whenever there was a gap when it comes to goals, and we did have a gap like this right after the pandemic started because of the whole uncertainty, and we started thinking maybe like it's not even a good idea to have any goals for the next few months. I mean, yeah, we're gonna cut costs, we're gonna adapt, but like, should we do OKRs? It's a bit weird. So we didn't do them for a few months, and I think everybody could feel like they're lacking the direction and like a sense of, this is the goal that I'm working on. So we quickly came back to doing OKRs again. And I think if like on the higher level, you have this, of course, it all starts with your vision and mission, but then if you also have the goals, people can always find their way back to what's the best way to proceed. And then for me personally, I usually don't do quarterly. I have like directions depending on the stage of the company that I have to concentrate on, and then I try to break it down again into like weekly things to do or daily tasks. And when you're a founder, your role changes so much throughout the company. It usually changes every few months. So sometimes you need to be a product manager or a hiring manager, but sometimes you have to fundraise. So like 3 to 4 months of your time are full time working on raising some funds. And these are different areas that require a lot of flexibility when it comes to goals and tasks as well.
Interesting about the OKRs. Did you guys have to switch the frequency of having these OKR discussions, or maybe the period? Is it still quarterly, or did you have to kind of decrease it to maybe monthly OKRs when the pandemic happened?
And it's still quarterly, but it's kind of related to what I shared about sticking to our vision and product. So after this period of figuring out what's the best way to proceed and being uncertain, once we came back to the concept of we want to stick to our vision and mission, but expand our product offering, this is where it really made sense, especially for our product team, to go back to quarterly goals and to go back to this quarter, we want to launch this or test this or improve the UX of that. And quarterly is, I think it's a good period of time. I know some companies do 6 weeks or 8 weeks. A month for me is really way too short. You only have like so many days in the month. And if you work on sprints, it's just a few sprints. And if you think about the overhead of planning these goals and then reporting on your progress, it just really takes too much time. So for us, quarterly is a good period.
And you personally, Tatyana, as a founder, as a CEO, could you lead me through your own process on a day-to-day basis? Like, how do you decide what should I focus on next day? Do you have some sort of a system? Imagine now is the time for you to plan your next day. Just lead us through the process and what really helps you to stay at the top of your game.
I think there are some great resources that I personally get inspired by. One that really influenced my my way of approaching this is called. It's actually a book that's free. It's published as a Google Doc on the internet, so anyone can find it and doesn't even have to buy it. And it's called The Great CEO Within. So if you just type that on Google, I'm sure you'll be able to find it. And there are usually a few dozen people on the Google Doc reading it at any point in time. It's become really popular. So it starts with how important it is to organize yourself before you organize others, and how you need to really keep track of your time, even if it sounds a bit crazy, like to be, I don't know, blocking everything on your calendar or using another app to track what you're doing on a daily basis. But you need to have this accountability, even if it's personal, even if nobody else knows about it. Some people do it with calendar audits. So imagine every Sunday you sit for like just 10 minutes and you look at your calendar of the week that just passed by. And you can easily see which things were kind of pointless, like they weren't urgent, they weren't important. So for some people, this is like admin tasks or something boring that they were doing. Which parts of your week were about emergencies and firefighting and people coming to you with their problems and you spending so many hours fixing them, and which parts were really about the goals and working on the goals. So for most people, it's incredibly hard to stick to the goals. And this includes me, this includes everyone. It's just there are so many situations that arise. Even checking your inbox for some people can take 2 to 3 hours a day because of the constant new messages coming in. So you have to try to be in control of your calendar. So you can limit some stuff, you can set some boundaries, you can learn to delegate, you can block hours in certain days just for thinking or planning or focused work. So these are some of the practices that that people can start improving with. But at the end of the day, I think it's about being really honest with yourself, because I mean, anyone can spend 8 hours on their laptop just doing whatever. And this whatever could be just reading some stuff, answering some emails, but like at the end of the day, did you really accomplish something? Did you move the needle, or was it just busy work? So that's the toughest part. Like busy work is always there. People are always going to message you and ask things. But were you really working on the things that matter?
And this comes down with actually creating this space that you talk about on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, creating space to review what you've been working on, where's the team going, what should we focus on as a team, what should I focus on as a founder. From all these bucket of opportunities, what are the few things that if I do them, if I get them done, they will move the needle? So the first part is about really downloading your head on a piece of paper, on your app, on your spreadsheet, whatever works for you. Put it in front of you. Don't keep it in your head. Just like David Allen loves to say, create space in your head by downloading your head somewhere else. Then you can have the chance to create a better decision. What is a higher priority connected to our OKRs, connected to our vision? Where should I put my attention? Having very clear structure. As you said, Tatyana, schedule things. Even schedule the meetings with yourself. From 10 to 11:30, I need to complete this contract. This is, Brian Tracy loves to call that as eating your frogs. This is the time to eat your frog. I'm fully focused 90 minutes. Unless something is burning, do not talk to me. Write me in Slack on the email. I'll get back to you. But I'm fully focused on this really clear objective. I need to get it done. So you schedule the things which is based on results instead of, hey, tomorrow I'll work on marketing. Yeah, but what does that mean? Let us get more clear. The more clear you are, the more likely you're going to get it done. And so the one side is the really creating the space for this planning process on a daily, on a weekly basis. But then I love the auditing piece that you included as well, which reminds me about another founder from Bulgaria. His name is Konstantin Jelepov from FireUp. He was, I think, named a couple of years in a row the best fintech startup in Bulgaria. What he does, what he learned to do himself is he would audit every 15 minutes of his time. So he had a spreadsheet, and every hour, I don't know if he has an alarm or he's just like intuitively looking at it, but he just looks back into the 60 minutes that just passed, and he will put in the spreadsheet what exactly he did. Work on the contract, talk to the guy by the coffee machine, whatever. And he said the first couple of days, I was so guilted by all the distractions that I'm so focused right now when I have to work. Because I don't want to write that I'm watching YouTube videos. I want to know that I've actually spent my time fully focused. And just by this simple practice of measuring, you're actually accountable to yourself, as you just said, Tatyana. It inspires you to be really focused, to define what these vital things are. Sometimes we don't know what these priorities are. Do you take the time, to the listeners, do you take the time to define what are the top 3 most important priorities for you? And how much time do you spend on these things? That's something to think about. And I think that the other side to it, and Tatyana, I'm curious to hear from you, how do you do within the context of your companies, how do you translate these priorities and how do you translate this culture into the team? You are really good in planning and prioritizing. I can see that. I saw that a couple of weeks ago. But how do we actually inspire our team to take this to heart and become good in self-management?
Well, I think you're most influenced by the people you're surrounded with. So back when it was just a few of us, mostly the co-founders, and we started hiring, especially if you don't do it at a crazy rate where the new hires outnumber the core team, then I think it comes up naturally. It's the new hires, they learn from the co-founder. So even unintentionally, you kind of pass down some habits that you have, or some values, or just ways of doing things. So how startups are mostly messy. They don't have a lot of processes. They don't have great handbooks on how things are done. But even the few that you have, they kind of shape how the next things are going to look like. So if this is a way, if you have a way of communicating, or writing a message, or writing something down, then it's actually highly likely that you're going to set a standard of how the others are going to start doing this, even simple things. So even if it's being on time for each meeting, then this is going to create a culture of people who respect each other's time. Or if it's accounting for example, OKRs. I know companies where they set them, but they never track them, and they actually get lost. And at the end of the quarter, they're like, oh yeah, we had this goals, but like actually nobody cared. So I think all these things, they are led by, so you can lead by example. And when you exemplify behaviors and things that are important to you, to the rest of the team, they pick it up easily, and they become like a shared culture. And for us, it's there's like a running joke, just because I studied in Germany and we had a few other people who've lived or studied in Germany. This is always kind of a German way of doing it, like being really organized and really precise and accounting for stuff. But I think it's really helpful, and founders who think these things are not important, they usually feel a burden once the organization grows and these things spin out of control. And if you end up raising money, hiring a few more dozen people, and then, for example, nobody has any rules on taking vacation or working time or scheduling meetings, then all these things come to bite you in the ass. And it's, I mean, I've seen situations where people are really frustrated because they didn't set these really easy and small things up in the beginning. So for us, we've always tried to set them up, and at least I personally think that how you do anything is how you do everything. I know that especially in a startup, you don't have the time to be perfect, and you don't need to be perfect when accomplishing a small task. So done is better than perfect. But at the same time, your whole attitude and time tracking or prioritization skills, they're just really important because of the limited time and resources that we have to actually do something on the market.
Yeah, that's a really, really relevant point. I want to actually go into a completely different direction, but it's somehow connected to the whole entrepreneurial journey. And there's this general perception sometimes that you can either focus a lot on achievement, or you can focus on fulfillment and being present and being happy. Like, can we actually combine both? Can we combine achievement with fulfillment? Can we find a balance in between really achieving these ambitious goals? I'm talking about ambitious goals, moving mountains, growing things, building stuff within the personal achievement. Where is the balance, and how do you personally define it?
So I'm trying to follow this like a philosophy. I was inspired by a speech that I heard a few months ago, and it was about when you think of an example of success. So for some people, it could be getting that promotion, or getting that company to this level, or having a lot of money, or buying a house, or being really good at something like running a marathon. So when you think of this as the end goal, you're probably going to feel really unhappy until you reach it. And once you reach it, you're quickly going to forget how great it is, and you're going to focus on the next thing. So on a daily basis, you're probably going to be less happy than other people with a different approach. So one little hack that I learned here is to try to feel like you're successful anytime you're doing even a small step to contribute to this larger goal. So if you want to run a marathon, if you go out and run even just 2 kilometers, you're successful because you're becoming the person who would one day run a marathon. And same for big ambitious goals. Like every time you're doing something to help yourself become this person, you are already successful. And success, some people think of it as winning an award or being nominated or being on a podcast. But most of the time it's within our head on whether we feel successful or not. And again, I've met so many people who I think are successful and they don't seem to really believe that. They've kind of normalized their achievements and they are now stressing out about the next thing. So I'm trying to avoid this. I'm trying to not put myself in a miserable situation where there's always another thing I need to do and there's always another level I need to get to, and trying to just feel like I'm on the right track and that this is good and it's great that I'm doing this instead of, I don't know, sleeping or being lazy or resting somewhere. So yeah, that's one thing that I found helpful. So maybe I can find a link to this speech and send it to you for the notes after.
Yeah, thank you so much. What is in that line of thought? What is success to you? How do you define success?
I'm currently using this definition that I just described, but to be honest, it has changed a lot throughout the years. So just based on my surroundings, people and things that influence me, I'm kind of adapting these beliefs, including the belief on success. So, and we have, I think, so we have a bunch of like pictures or screenshots that we've saved throughout the ClaimCompass journey that kind of remind us of just milestones or things that were worth mentioning. And I remember one screenshot from the first few months after launching the company when all of us still had other jobs. So this was just something we were working on evenings and weekends. We didn't pay ourselves any salaries. We didn't have employees or an office. And we got to a milestone. And I don't really remember what it was, but let's say it was 40,000 euros in secured compensation. So that's about 10,000 euros for revenue for us. And just reaching this milestone, I had written a really like super long and emotional Slack message to the whole team that was, we should be so proud. Like imagine 40,000 euros. Imagine if we get to 400,000 euros or like the sky's the limit. We can do anything. And we were so proud because launching something, it could be a complete failure. Like it could be a product that nobody cares about. And in our case, it had a little bit of traction. It had some validation. So we couldn't believe that we reached that milestone at that point. So even at that point for us, success was just somebody cared about our product. Then it became reaching 100,000 customers or reaching 1 million in annual revenue and all these things. But yeah, right now, especially after the year that we had, I'm trying to be a little bit more grounded and to just, use the definition of success that I just mentioned and try to feel successful whenever I'm doing something towards the big goal.
Thank you so much, Tatyana. What a beautiful story and what a beautiful reminder that no matter where we are, we should find the time to pause and just appreciate and celebrate the achievements. This gives you motivation, this inspires you, and at the end of the day, it's not just about achievement. It's not just about more. It's actually about enjoying the whole thing with the ups and downs, being with the other team and having a good time on top of all the results. And since the time is running, I would just like to give you a space here to maybe share with the audience what's the focus of the company at the moment after COVID perhaps made you change the plans, and where could people find you and get in touch with you and with your company?
So before the pandemic, we only have people with European flights, and I'm really excited to share that now we've expanded our the value that we provide to our customers. So now we have an app called Service. You can find it on getservice.com. And this app, it's once you sign up, it can actually find and get all the claims that you have, be for European flights where you can get up to 600 euros in cash, be for international flights where you can get goodwill compensation from the airline, like vouchers or miles or discounts, anything to make up for that disruption. But it also monitors your future hotel reservations where we can help you save money. We monitor your the price of your room, and if it drops before your trip, we automatically rebook you on the lower price. So the vision here is to actually save you as much money as we can on your travel, and to inform you about any possible claims worldwide that you can get money for. So this is what we've been working on in the past few months, past few quarters, and we're really excited to get this to market. We are concentrating on the American and European markets for starters. So if you are in any of these geographies, you can download the app for free. You can sign up for free and just test it, see if it finds your trips, and if you have any money sitting in your inbox. And you can find me personally on all the usual social media outlets. So on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook, I'd be happy to connect. Especially if you're an early stage founder, I do dedicate part of my time mentoring and helping early stage founders. So it's always a pleasure to meet you if you have an idea that you're working on.
Thank you so much once again, Tatyana, for sharing your learnings, being honest and blunt with all the lessons that you learned on the way. Very, very grateful for having you. And to the listeners, thank you for listening, and see you again at the next episode of Productivity Mastery. Have an amazing day, guys.